episode today of Meet Your Neighbors. We have the distinct privilege to be with Robert Aiudi today. I think we are all really fortunate to have him as our neighbor in Brantford. What an asset to our community.
I think so.
So, Robert,
Thank you
welcome.
so much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Literally, we came and met Robert a couple of weeks ago and talked with him. And honestly, my jaw was, I was in awe. I think we both were. I mean, I know a lot of incredible people in the community. We both do, David and I, but I don't know. I think Robert just sort of is way up there. So going over all his enormous accomplishments in his short skills and his short and precious life so far, David and I talk, where do we begin? Everything he's done and is about is so fascinating. But we decided, Robert, to start with languages.
You make me cry.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, sure, languages.
So we're going to ask you some questions, if you don't mind.
No.
How you answer me, I might understand if you speak English. But
Okay,
if
no,
you
no,
don't,
yeah, of course. No,
but-
I'll answer you in English.
How many languages do you speak?
How many languages you speak is a hard one because you're always learning new ones. And, after a few glasses of wine, you can speak 12. After 5 glasses of wine, you can speak 20. It's really sort of like that. And so it's a hard question. I mean, I can tell you ones I'm good at.
Okay.
Or at least conversational.
Fine.
There's always a issue in linguistics between what's fluent,
Right.
what's bilingual.
Okay.
And, I'm not really bilingual in anything, but I'm fluent in a lot. Yeah, which means just you can carry on a conversation.
So in about how many languages can you converse?
Probably 12-ish.
12.
Yeah, and then and it's always a strange question, to answer because you're at a party, someone asks you that question, and then the room goes silent and everybody's looking at you. And I've never really enjoyed that kind of attention because it's my thing. Things that I've done are about me, about things that I've enjoyed. Rather than what people are going to think about.
Yeah,
So,
but it is quite admirable, and it opens up a world to you, doesn't it?
oh, for sure.
So of those 12, can you just name some of those?
Yeah. It sort of goes along with my story. So my family is Italian.
Great.
And my grandparents came from 3 parts of Italy. So I heard bits and pieces of several dialects when I was a kid.
Okay.
And then as an adult, because I had the facility with Italian, I worked at a company that sent me to Italy. So then I started to learn sort of standard modern Italian and worked there for quite a number of years. But I also went to school in France. My aunt, when I was 7 years old, told me that you have to go abroad. So I remember, and she passed away when I was 10.
Oh.
So I had always remembered, whatever, but I really wanted to go. And so I went to France, then I studied in Germany, then I lived in Holland for a while. Then my job took me to Spain, Portugal, Hungary, Greece, Sweden, Norway, then Asia.
So, Robert, when you went to all these countries, you weren't just a typical tourist like David and I have traveled a lot, but
Sure.
3 weeks
Yeah,
we don't
come
learn. Right. You lived there. You lived
Yeah.
in these
So
countries?
what I did was, my job was great, but I used it to travel. I mean, there's nothing better when you have an expense account and people are paying for your hotels. So I worked at a really good company, which was called Dragon Systems, and there was speech recognition was the field, and so they, for lack of a better term, they really respected my ability and let me do what I wanted to do. So I had the opportunity, if I went to Beijing, I'd leave on a Friday, get there over the weekend, so I could, be a tourist.
Explore.
Then, work all week and then come home on the following Monday. So I would have another weekend, so I would do that a lot when I traveled.
But that didn't afford you the opportunity, a long weekend, to learn the language.
No. So the language is my avocation, my hobby. I mean, my sister was learning French in high school. I took her book and started to learn it too. It just was a facility. And interestingly enough, I worked at MIT for 4 years in the foreign language department.
Oh.
And I didn't really do any particular research but I was surrounded by a lot of people who were. So what I think I've come across, discovered, and really here in Brantford, because it is so quiet, and after living in New York City for so long, Brantford was really quiet,
quiet.
And when you live in a quiet place, you tend to think more. And what I found was that for some reason, hearing a language or hearing an accent does something in my brain. It causes some kind of pleasure feeling. So for me, it wasn't just an ability to learn language. It was also a pleasurable feeling I love to listen to a language I don't understand.
Wow.
I think there's something that goes on in my brain. And I've talked to a lot of people who do research, and they say that we're finding out that that's a case. So similarly, someone who's good at math, somehow their brain enjoys that journey of going through, and I don't know why, but but
it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, math. I was really bad at math, but my point is, there's whatever our gifts are tend to be something that our brain really likes.
It's almost like music, isn't it?
It's like music. Yeah, it's like anything that someone's good at that they don't really know why. Because I know many mathematicians who are brilliant and they just spend hours and hours and hours going through proofs of things, which would drive me crazy.
Right.
And there also must be an inquisitiveness where you want to try to understand. I wonder what
Absolutely.
This is, and
It's a
and that happened to me.
yeah.
That happened to me when my grandparents would speak Italian, or I'd be like, "What are they saying?" Or my aunt's husband's family were Polish, and Polish was really a mystery to me, because it sounded so foreign,
From Italian.
Yeah, from Italian. So, yeah, that all really jazzed me, and I was always thinking and looking, and if the internet had been around when I was a kid, I would speak 50 languages. But we didn't have languages. I had the World Book encyclopedias, which are actually right there off camera.
Wow. Okay.
well,
So
we don't know if you got to Greece yet, but as far as I'm concerned with languages, it's all Greek to me.
Yeah, it is, exactly.
me too.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't mind, I just would like
No.
to proceed a little bit more
Yeah, of
with it
course.
because I find it fascinating.
Yeah, sure.
So, are you willing to name for us the 12 languages
Sure.
that
So,
you're fluent in?
so English. Right? We always,
Okay.
right, that's one of them.
Good.
I get to count English.
Good.
Then, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. So the main Romance languages. I don't speak Romanian, which is a Romance language. Then German, Dutch, Swedish, and consequently Norwegian and Danish are the same, basically. Spelling different, but basically the same language. Little different pronunciation, but I can carry on a conversation. Let's see. Then I moved to Asia at some point. I studied for a short period of time at Yale. I studied Chinese, so Mandarin, and then Cantonese kind of comes a little naturally if you do speak Mandarin. Anyway, and then Japanese, Korean, yeah.
It makes me silent.
Yeah, I know. It just, think of whatever you love to do and do it really well. And that's sort of what it is. And I always hate the question because, I never did it to impress anybody.
No.
I did it because it really was my
it's a
thing.
joy.
It's a joy for me.
It's a passion.
Exactly.
And I think, passions for everyone are different. And if we honor our passion and proceed in that path, I think often we do really well because we love it.
Exactly. I think Oprah Winfrey said that.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, yeah.
So I'm also curious. I'm really talking a lot about languages.
No, it's fine. I love languages, so please feel free.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this might sound a little like a foolish question, but to me it would be interesting.
No foolish questions.
Each language is so uniquely different and admirable in its own way and difficult and challenging in its own way.
Yes.
But do you have favorites?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So
yeah,
what
of
might
course,
they
of course.
be?
So my favorite language is Dutch.
Dutch.
Because it's kind of a cute language. Like the first time I was in Amsterdam, I, was in a telephone booth, well, it's a telephone booth, right? We don't have them anymore, but yeah. But telephone in Dutch is spelled Telefoon. So to me, it looked like telefoon, right?
Right.
So I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. And then because there's a lot of double vowels in Dutch, and there's lots of diminutives. So like, like in Spanish, Carlito, those diminutives, those little things. Or in Yiddish, like la, you say, spätzle, for, the little la at the end. Is it a diminutive? So Dutch has lots of diminutives. So it just sounds really cute when people speak it.
Can we hear it? Can you say something for us?
Wat kan ik zeggen? Ik ben zo blij dat jullie zijn hier vandaag gekomen. Hè? En ik hoop dat we kunnen een goede conversatie hebben.
You're so glad we came.
Yes, see,
Yeah,
it sounds a little like
Yiddish.
like Yiddish.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
In my
Germanic
home,
languages.
welcome to my home.
Yeah,
Did you say
yeah,
that?
yeah.
I heard
Welkom.
home.
Another really weird thing about languages. So if you're inclined to think that you've had former lives,
Yes.
sometimes I wonder if I did.
Who you were, where you were.
Well,
where
one time,
you were.
so when I was in New Haven 30 years ago, I worked in a restaurant. And, I hated Sunday mornings. And I was tired on Sunday mornings, still to this day. So I worked at a restaurant in New Haven, and I always had to work brunch. And I was 24 or something. And one day this woman came in, and she actually came to the restaurant early. We started at 11:30, and she was allowed to be seated at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I was really angry. But she was quite elderly. She was probably in her early 80s, maybe, or even a little older. And I went up to the table, and she grabs my wrist, and she says to her husband, "Oh, this kid has so much energy."
Really?
And I was like asleep. So, long story short, she said to me that I was a Dutch minister in the 15th century.
Oh my
And that I was not Marco Polo, but that I was with Marco Polo. And, I thought, well, maybe I am something. And, when I started to learn Dutch, my Dutch teacher was like, God, you're really learning this fast, And I just thought it's because I liked it, And then Chinese came very easy too.
Wow.
Chinese, you wouldn't think, right? But it came so easy to the point where in my first couple lessons of Chinese, my Chinese teacher asked me, did I study Chinese before? And I said no. So
That's amazing.
there might be something like that.
So can you say, is that another favorite?
Chinese?
Is
Oh
it?
yeah,
Can
definitely.
you
I'm great at
please-
restaurants.
Love it. I would love to go with you
I've had some,
sometime.
yeah.
It'd be so
I've had,
much fun.
and I actually worked in a restaurant for 6 months in a Chinese restaurant.
And did you speak Chinese?
I learned more and more and more. Yeah, of course. Along with
The
cooking.
foods.
Yeah, along with cooking and learning all the traditional dishes, etc. I also definitely, learn more speaking. So.
Wow. So
Yeah,
can
so
you
Chinese
say
is
something?
so Chinese is a tonal language. So when you speak Chinese, you have to have a tone to your words. So for instance, when you study Chinese, you repeat things like ma 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 ma, or ta 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 ta.
And each reflection means
Is a
something
different word.
different.
Yes. So a good example of that would be the combination of shui and jiao. So if you shui jiao, then you sleep. But if you shui jiao, is a dumpling.
Oh!
So 我要吃水饺 means I want to have dumplings. But 我要睡觉 means I want to sleep.
Oh, quite different.
So it doesn't seem different to us. But I always was really amazed in China. If you do use the wrong tone, they don't understand what you mean.
Of course. Or they,
To us, it sounds so similar,
right.
but it's not similar at all.
Wow.
To them,
What
it's,
a heightened ability to hear and
yeah,
listen.
exactly.
So would you kindly say something to us in Chinese?
Yeah, 欢迎到我家来，我们高兴认识你们。
Have no clue. Can't figure that one out. So
Yeah, I say just welcome to my house and nice to meet you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. And I'm going to ask one more.
Sure,
a
of course.
third,
Yes,
a
of
third
course.
language that
Yeah.
you just simply love to talk in.
I think French.
French.
Yeah,
it's so
French-
beautiful.
French is the only language that I really learned, in school, at university, and I had to really study, very hard and very, yeah. So I really worked hard to be at a university level of French, and so I just think it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Yeah,
Can
it's
you
beautiful.
please say something? in
Sure. Je suis très content que vous êtes venu aujourd'hui chez moi et j'espère qu'on va avoir une bonne conversation.
I love it.
Yeah.
I got conversation out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
conversation.
I actually just made a mistake, but anyway.
That's all right. Most
No
of
one's
us
gonna get it,
won't
yeah,
know
yeah,
the
yeah.
difference. And you
Yeah.
said,
I said, it's so nice that you came to my house, and I hope we have a nice conversation.
yes,
So,
magnificent.
yeah.
You know, we're sitting here. Oh, look, folks. I mean, this is one thick book.
Yeah.
Are you studying this book?
So this book, along with Chinese speaking, I really like writing Chinese, and so Chinese calligraphy is you've seen it, whatever, and so this is actually a dictionary of Chinese calligraphy styles, because there's many different styles, and the title actually says calligraphy dictionary.
Oh,
So you can, when you open it up, you can see different ways of writing the same character. And so it's really, I love the book. I mean, I have it bookmarked, and I practice, it's called shufa in Chinese. Shufa means calligraphy. And so I practice almost daily.
Wow. Do
Yeah.
you?
And again, I don't know why.
You love it.
I love it, yeah, and it's never going to make me any money or anything, but I just feel a comfortability with it and a peaceful tranquility. And
Wow.
here in Brantford, I'm very tranquil. Yeah, so it's all good. It's all good. It really
Right.
is quite nice, and I have a lot of Chinese friends who are also very interested in calligraphy, because calligraphy in the Western world, like the English world, is kind of an old craft that has meaning and is beautiful. But in Chinese, because the Chinese characters are pictograms of words, you can actually make some really interesting puns, really interesting, you sort of add a sense of beauty to a writing that you would never have in a Western language. We just don't have the same depth to add a picture with our words.
Yeah, it's not quite art, our language.
Yeah,
Whereas-
exactly. Chinese can be. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I'm sorry. But the thing is,
it's fascinating.
yeah, you can really, when someone writes a poem, you not only have the words, but with the characters, you can draw lots of visuals. You can draw lots of puns. You can draw a lot of visuals that will add to the depth of a poem.
And the beauty.
And the beauty of a poem. Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I think also
makes-
Persian, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Persian
The
is
Persian
gorgeous.
and Arabic. Yeah, absolutely. It's that's a whole other different thing. But I actually have a friend who, he's in Iraq actually, and I met him online, and he is an artist.
Oh.
And it's so funny you mention that, because what he does is he takes an Arabic. He's a schooled Arabic calligrapher. And just like Hebrew, you've seen beautiful
It
Hebrew
is
hand done. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And so he does the very wispy Arabic
It's
writing.
gorgeous.
But what he does is so amazing. He then takes that Arabic character, he turns it on its side to make it look Asian.
Oh,
So
God.
he's really, it's just the first time I saw his stuff, it just really blew me away, because in our such divided world, in such fearful world of other cultures, etc., here is this artist who is building a bridge
Exactly.
between some things that are so disparate. You would never think that a Japanese character is going to look like an Arabic script and
Right.
vice versa. And to add even more interesting thing, he writes them, then I get to look at them.
Wow.
And you would be shocked at how many times his Arabic turned Japanese actually looks like the Japanese character. It's uncanny.
It's
It's uncanny, and it's to
But
me.
doesn't it
it's,
show the oneness of us all?
Oh, totally. And I love to, and I'm trying actually to figure out a way to get him out of Baghdad, which is not a very good situation right now. But try to bring him, to the States, and to have him be shown, because it is exactly this notion of bringing together two disparate parts of the world that you would never even
I
begin
just
to
love
think.
it.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's what peace is built on.
Absolutely.
So there's one more piece to this,
Sure.
folks, because this is, really, Robert
you.
is just a wealth.
Anyway, thank you.
You did calligraphy in Chinese and Japanese, and
Yes.
you told David and I when we came last time
Mm-hmm.
to talk with you that one, I think it was a Chinese elder that
Yes.
said that you could not have done this. I don't believe
Yeah.
you did it.
Yep. Yeah.
So
It was actually, so what happened was I drew, as I do on a daily basis, I work on calligraphy. And so I did, well, it's funny, I'll tell you a secret. That so Chinese famous calligraphers often in history do their best calligraphy when they're a little tipsy.
Oh gosh.
And it's a kind of thing. So one night in Boston, actually, I did this calligraphy and I was pretty tipsy. And it just came out really well. And they talk about the chi and how the chi will flow
energy.
better. And when you're a little tipsy, you don't put up a lot of walls and your chi can flow better. And when you write, your brush goes really smoothly and boom, right? And there's plenty of history examples of this in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong. So anyway, so I did this and I rolled it up and I forgot about it. So then I moved to New York and I had all my things brought down there and then I unfurled it one day and I thought, well, I should really frame this. So I went down to Chinatown to a framing shop. It was an art / calligraphy / framing shop. And I brought it in and I asked the man, how much would it cost to frame this? And he said to me, who did this? And I said, I did it. And he said, no, you didn't.
I don't think so.
I said, I did. He said, no, you didn't. So then he went to the back of the room. He brought out a Chinese stone with ink on it and a brush. And he gave me a piece of paper and he said,
tested you.
show me. Yeah.
But
And
you weren't tipsy though.
I wasn't tipsy, but I proved that I could really write Chinese characters with a brush. And then after that, his son, his daughter, his grandparents, and his wife all came out to see the white guy who could write Chinese characters. That's what I was told.
Incredible story.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, and then it's in my bedroom, the piece, and yeah.
Can we take a second for you? Can you get it off the wall?
Of course, yeah,
Show
yeah,
us?
of course,
okay,
of course,
if we
of
can
course.
take a second.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Robert, thanks so much for bringing that in.
Yeah,
Can you just
sure.
explain what?
Yeah. So it's a Taoist expression, and it means basically don't, not, do, or be. So Taoism was all about just kind of letting things happen, because the Tao is already destined for you, and so in China it was very important. I mean, a country with billions and billions and billions of people, and they learned that. Don't sweat. I guess don't sweat the small stuff. Is basically what it means.
Is that what it means?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's such
And
an
Because
important.
it's going to happen.
Right.
Because
life
whatever is predestined to you in your Tao
Right.
will happen. So the cool thing about this also was the way I found this expression was in the Forbidden City in Beijing.
Wow.
It was right above the throne of the
Wow.
emperor.
Really?
Yeah, and obviously you can imagine what the message was. With the emperor of China, with people coming into him and saying, "Oh, it's flooded," and there was a typhoon, and he would say, "Don't sweat the small stuff."
A wise man.
And I didn't know. I knew the characters up on that throne, but I didn't know what it meant. So I, remembered it, and then I found out what it meant.
Beautiful,
Oh,
beautiful.
wow.
Yeah.
So
Thank
I think it goes along with we plan, and life happens.
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
it?
exactly what this means. So that's why I have it in my bedroom, because in the morning I remember the expression, and more importantly at night when you can't sleep.
Good. Beautiful to remember.
So,
Yeah.
Robert.
I just wanted to say
Yeah.
one more thing.
Sure.
I know you're learning
She does.
one more language.
Yes.
Which is it? You
Oh.
said you were studying another language
Asian.
now. an
Yeah.
Indonesian.
Oh, sorry. Well, remember I said I always study languages. So I'm actually at the moment kind of really doing more in-depth Danish, also Korean,
Yeah.
and also in the last 2 months, 3 months, I've gone back to Arabic because Arabic it's not very easy. It's a pretty complicated language if you're a Western language speaker, but challenge, right? And it's actually really close to Hebrew. They're the same root. Semitic languages. And I often
we're cousins. If
yeah,
only.
I know, right? I know. And you hear a lot of similar words in Arabic and Hebrew. So which I've studied. I've studied Hebrew. I don't speak it, but I've studied it enough to know. Yeah. And because remember I told you I wanted a bar mitzvah, and I couldn't have a bar mitzvah because I was Catholic. But I remember thinking, oh, you get to speak a foreign language in front of a group of people. I thought I want to do that. Yeah. So anyway,
love it.
yeah,
Thank you,
I swear
thank
that
you.
really happened. Robin Salowitz and Cindy Steinberg were my friends, and they were getting their bar mitzvah, and I was like, what's that? Oh, we have to learn Hebrew. We have to say it in front of the congregation. I'm
Right.
like,
A lot of
really?
us don't
How
learn
cool.
God.
Anyway, yeah.
Fascinating.
So, Robert, you
Yes.
told Marge and I that you
Yes.
lived in New York City for
I did.
16 years.
Yeah.
And so what were you doing there in terms of work?
Yeah, so I originally my background, my job has been since around 1993, 94 in speech recognition.
Oh.
So Siri,
Yes,
it was a
Siri.
real,
Oh,
so it was a real easy transition from learning a lot of languages to then learning how to use languages to write with your voice in a phone or on a computer.
Okay.
So I was so lucky, really lucky, to find this job. Actually, dear friend of mine, gave me the job advertisement when it was in the newspaper. Remember that? No jobs. There's no jobs advertisements in the newspaper. It's all online.
Right.
But I remember he handed me this thing and he said, "This is your job." So I never thought they'd hire me because it was really technical. But as I said, I had worked at MIT for 4 years, and I took a lot of technical courses and stuff. But what they really wanted was my languages, which I've never thought was a big deal, because it's what I've always known, So they hired me, and I really just enjoyed that job incredibly. I mean, I was allowed to learn more languages. I did press conferences in French and whatever. I gave a small speech in front of a group of 1,000 Chinese developers once in Chinese, and nobody listened to me. They just were thinking, "Oh my God, this white guy is speaking Chinese."
White.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So in New York, I continued with that and continued to. When I hit 42, I thought, well, now I can be a consultant. You get paid a little more, and your taxes are a little bit easier. So that's what I did.
Wow.
So what brought you then to Brantford?
Oh, that's not so happy. So my sister about 7 years ago had a very bad stroke, and she was in Gaylord, which I think you guys might know here in Connecticut. She passed away, or she was in Gaylord for about 2.5 years, and then she went into a nursing home for about a year, and then her doctor said she could live alone. And at this point, the writing was on the wall. I needed to come up and kind of help her, and then my mom simultaneously was getting older, and she ended up falling, breaking her hip, and moving into the same nursing home. So I luckily had 2 people in the same nursing home. I didn't have to go to 2 different ones. But that's the reason why I moved up here. Yeah, and I chose this house because it was affordable, way cheaper than New York.
And how long have you been living here?
It's going to be 4 years,
4
actually,
years.
yeah. And so it's flown by.
So then there's quite a difference between the big city and Brantford.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's okay.
It was really hard. I mean, I think for the first year, though, I was so focused on helping my sister and my mom that I didn't really pay much attention. I definitely felt lonelier. I felt quiet. It was way quieter. Although I chose the bedroom in the house that's the loudest because
You needed the noise.
Yeah, and I live right on Route 1, so I never think there's noise. People who live here say, "Oh, it's so noisy on Route 1." I'm like, I don't
Not
hear
to
it. I
you.
still don't hear it. And in fact, it makes me calm when I hear the cars. And also my friends. I missed my friends.
Oh,
Luckily, I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and I've made friends in Brantford.
Good.
Yeah, I have really good friends. Strega restaurant is one of my places I hang out. We speak Italian, and great place.
How lovely.
And I always find the people who speak foreign languages somehow.
Yeah.
That's neat.
So I guess you're going to tell me now that you probably work from home
Yes.
for a living.
Yes.
Aside from all the arts and crafts
Yes,
and
exactly.
skills that you.
Yeah. So I obviously worked in offices for a long time, but the economies are such that you can work at home. And when I lived in New York, it was easy to work at home because then I could go out and have lunch at a restaurant or something. When I moved to Brantford, I was worried that working at home was going to be challenging, but it actually isn't. And I built around me all these things that I do to kind of keep myself occupied.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So do you still get to travel with your work? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't travel internationally at all. It's always in the United States now, which is important.
So you go from here to New York.
I go here to New York, yeah. Sometimes California, Las Vegas, of course, because Las Vegas always has large technical trade shows.
Yeah.
I go to those. But I have to kind of stay close to be near my mom and make sure she's good. And, yeah.
So your mom is still alive?
She's still alive. She's 92 this November 3rd.
Oh,
my sister passed away a year and a half ago. And my mom and she were close friends. So I can't really abandon my mom. I have to stay with my mom. I always say she made sure my diapers were clean for the first 5 years of my life. So it's time for me to...
That's beautiful. We don't.
Well, you have
think
to.
That
Yeah,
way,
I can.
so
Yeah, I have to. Yeah.
I admire
People
it.
say that, and I think, how can you not?
But
Yeah.
some of us don't.
Yeah.
So I
Anyway.
still admire
Thank
it
you.
when someone does.
Yeah.
So, Robert, we know you lived in France. You mentioned that.
Yep.
And we also know that you're quite a great cook.
Yeah.
Did you learn some of this when you
Oh,
lived
for
in
sure.
France?
Yeah. So I was so lucky to have two grandmothers, a grandfather, and a father who loved to cook as well. My mom as well. But the foods that are so popular now in restaurants, I was eating when I was a kid. Polenta and arugula salad and
But you
mozzarella.
didn't like it as a kid, did you?
Well, I didn't like. No, I didn't actually. Some of it was a little sour or whatever, but Italians like sour flavors. Anyway, but so that was really good. And then when I was in France, I actually had a really close friend who was a chef, and I used to come in. I lived about 45 minutes from Paris. Her restaurant was in Paris, and I used to come in on the weekends and help her in the kitchen, and didn't realize I was learning basically classical French technique.
Wow.
How to make apricot glazes and croissants and all that stuff. And so it was really, really cool. And then with the food and with the language, I was always the one at the table. How do you pronounce this? How do you say this? And so that's where my language stuff. I have a food
Right.
website came about.
It's
Yeah.
so beautifully paired.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, and again, back to the notion of me doing things that I like. I like to do it, and so I blog every day and write something. On the blog every day, just because I think it's so fascinating. There's things we don't realize about food, along with foreign language, that are so obvious, but we don't know them. And once we learn them, we think, "Wow, that's so cool."
Yeah, it is.
So that's.
I know you call yourself, I believe, a language chef.
Yeah. Well,
What does that mean?
So we came up with the name the language chef because it was about language and food. So to say basically that we're cooking, so there's a chef, but there's also the language part of it.
So that's the blog.
That's the blog.
That's the blog.
Is the language chef. Yeah.
So do you have a lot of folks following?
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I mean, I don't do a lot of aggressive marketing and stuff like that. We have in the past. There was once where there was going to be a television show that fell through because of YouTube. Right, YouTube all of a
Okay.
sudden became really popular, and I had to make a living. So I had to really work and whatever. But it's still there, and I do it because I like it.
Good.
And someday someone maybe will do something with it.
And are you cooking in all ethnic cuisines?
Yeah, I mean, so when you move from New York City to Brantford, if you want takeout, you can get it, but if you want good takeout, you have to make it. So
Yeah, good
I end up making a lot of food. I do everything from Italian to Chinese to Middle Eastern to Indian, and I do it myself. I like to do it. It's relaxing, and I have time. I came here, I had a lot of time. I didn't run out and go to bars. I stay at home and cook. And so, but I always liked to cook. It always was something that relaxed me. It was always something that was part of my family. We always were in the kitchen. We were always eating. We were always at the dining room table.
And connecting and gathering.
And gathering and being Italian.
It's a beautiful part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we noticed in the other room that there's the open hearth.
Yes.
In this historic house.
In this
Yes,
historic
and
house.
this house
Yeah.
is built when?
1710.
1710.
Yeah,
It is
exactly.
very charming, an immense character. Does every room have a fireplace?
So there's 4 fireplaces, and not every room has a fireplace, but in the old days, the fires were always going in the fireplace, which ended up warming the chimney. And the chimney then would radiate heat out. So the fireplace we're sitting in front of is actually blocked off, but the other 3 fireplaces I can use.
And are you heating that area of the home with the fireplace?
So when it gets really, really cold, another thing I never noticed in New York City, right? Because you don't notice the
Right.
weather really, but when you're in Bradford and it's 25 degrees out, you really
You
notice
feel it.
Yeah, and so I definitely in the winter have the fires going.
Great.
Yeah.
So you're
So-
talking about the
sorry,
open hearth.
yeah.
Yes.
So the open hearth in there, do you cook?
Oh yeah, for sure. So just another story about Italy. So when I was 19 in France in school, I went to Italy for Easter vacation for 2 weeks, and I went to see my relatives. And the first house I went to was my grandfather on my father's side, the relatives. And I walk into the house, and the kitchen is bare. There's nothing in the kitchen. It looked like they were moving. Like it was literally bare. So then I went through a door and walked into the living room / dining room, and that's where my Zia, means like aunt, who is really not my aunt. She was my grandfather's cousin's daughter's wife. She was cooking on the fireplace, and she said to me, I said, wow, that's so interesting. And she was embarrassed, and she said, oh, this is so old-fashioned. But she said, I learned how to do it this way.
Wow.
So she didn't learn how to use a stove. And this is in my lifetime, our lifetime.
Oh.
So I think of her all the time, and I cook on this. And what people should really imagine and really appreciate, and especially in a place like Brantford with lots of historical homes, those people, especially the women, worked really hard. I mean, to cook on a fireplace, to bend over and to cook on a fireplace is excruciating. I mean, and I really, may sound a little strange, but I really admire the people who lived in this house, especially the women who had to work that thing, because it is not easy. But I work on it. There are a lot of Italian dishes that lend themselves to a pot. So, tomato sauce, polenta, chicken stew, a lot of Italian dishes that I grew up on, I can cook on the fireplace. And it's a totally different taste.
It is a different taste?
Yeah, it's so different. And I have had many friends come here and do it in the winter, the fire's on and I cook on the fireplace, and everybody loves it, and they're all like, wow, it's so different.
Is it more enhanced, the
So,
flavors?
yeah, so I think just to make it sound easier, so when I do make tomato sauce, it can have a little smoky flavor. So it can feel a little more barbecue-y sauce than Italian sauce, but it's not really barbecue sauce, but has a flavor that you notice.
Yeah, and I would think, years ago, 1700s, 1800s, families were larger.
Oh, yeah.
So when they were cooking for hours and hours.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah, you didn't have Big Y or Stop and Shop, so you had to make all your food. And when you do live in a house like this, and you see a little bit of a glimpse of what it is, I mean, these people were hard-working people.
Is it all right with you if we take a look at
Oh, of course, yeah.
So let's go, folks.
Yeah.
We'll show you the open hearth.
Yes.
So, folks, we're now in Robert's dining room, which is amazingly charming, historic, all the character you could want in a home. And this is the open hearth. So
Right.
can you just give us a little bit of a sense of
Sure,
what
yeah.
you make?
So this is the dining room now, but this really was the kitchen. And you can't see it off camera, but there's a very big beam to the left of me that was actually the end of the house, the original house. So it was a very small room that could be heated by the fire. And so what I have here are just 2 pots that I actually use. One of them actually is from Italy. It's a copper pot for polenta. So yeah, I use that, and then the smaller one I use to make some sauces or whatever. But the crane moves out back and forth, and there's a real way to know how to cook where you don't want to burn yourself, and you don't want to. And sometimes it's often difficult to see in the pot because the fire's behind it, and it creates a shadow. where you can't really see in the pot. So whenever you cook on the fireplace like this, I'm always moving the crane out so I can see what's in the pot and then moving it back in.
So you have to stir more often than usual in the
Well,
stove?
so that's the other thing you learn to manage your coals. So, and what's really interesting about this fireplace, as opposed to the other fireplaces were used to push heat out into the room. This fireplace was actually made to cook things. So the first time I started a fire in this fireplace, it took me a half an hour because this fireplace was built to have a slow burn because it was a cooking fireplace rather than a fast burn in other fireplaces that were meant for heat. And those are really subtle little details about the house that you wouldn't really know unless you lived here and you tried to start a fire in this fireplace because again, this fireplace was made for cooking with a slower flame, and the other fireplaces were made to heat the room.
So then, is it more comfortable to cook here in summer?
Oh, that's a really good question. So so exactly. So out from the fireplace in the room here, underneath the floor, is a massive stone slab. Oh. And what it does is, in the winter or in the summer, it keeps the room cool. Oh. And the reason why they did that was first to balance the chimney so it didn't fall over. But the effect that's good. But the effect was also that it would keep this room cooler because they needed a fireplace during the summer. So I have friends who come over in August, hottest day of August, 95, 100 degrees. They walk in this room and they're like, "Oh, you have the air conditioning on?" And I say, "No, I don't." So again, another one of those little tidbits in the house that you don't realize about the house, but it's so interesting that they thought of those things back in the day. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Do you cook on a regular stove?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
So do you only cook for company here? Or?
No, I just cook for myself sometimes. Just in the winter, I like to do the fire and cook sometimes myself. I have a lot of cast iron pans that I use as well, and that's great. This is a Dutch oven, which is actually used as an oven where you put something inside and then you put coals on it, and it actually creates a small oven. So I bake pies and stuff like that in there.
In there?
Yeah, in there, yeah.
In that black?
Yes, exactly. Yep. The cover comes off, there's stones at the bottom, and you put in your pie plate, and then it creates a small oven where the heat is circulating, and then you put coals on the bottom and you put coals on the top.
So did you learn all this, Robert?
Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts.
Yeah, I learned the Dutch oven in Boy Scouts because we used to go out in the field and cook, and it was really where I learned that.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Boy Scouts. I swear. Anyway.
So I'm still here, and I have some other points of interest that I'd like to make. And actually, I'd like to ask about some of your other skills.
Okay.
Because I notice over on the other side of the room
if we could take the viewers to the other part
we
of
have
the
a
dining
large
room.
Yes.
And a smaller one
Yes.
in the back there, which seems to be an active one. You have
So
a project going on?
Right, so they're both active. The one behind you, I'm actually threading up now. Excuse me, threading up now to start to make a series of rugs. So what you see is it's called the warp. So the warp is on the back, wound on the back, and I'm threading through the heddles into the beater on the front, tie it on the front, and then start making rugs.
Wow. I volunteered at there's the Weaving Guild in Hartford.
Yeah, we're very famous.
Helping people. It's quite complicated.
Well, it's not so complicated. It's just tedious.
It's better if you got to know what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. But interestingly enough, if you were born 200 years ago, you would have definitely learned how to do this when you were probably 6 or 7 years old. I mean, people needed to have these skills so that they could make clothes, make rugs, make all that stuff. Yeah.
So, how did you get interested in it?
Okay, so another weird story, but so the true story is when I was 7 years old, I had an ear infection, and I had a bag of cotton balls that were next to me, and I was reading the World Encyclopedia that my dad bought in 1962, and spinning, and I kept thinking spinning, and then I took the ball and I started to spin thread. Wow. So then from there, I took a bicycle wheel, I made a spinning wheel. Then from there, I built a loom, and I was about 12 years old when I built the loom. My uncle helped me, and the loom quite large, like this. And then my grandmother walks into the kind of small shed where the loom was, and she almost had a heart attack because apparently my great-grandfather, her father, was a silk weaver from northern Italy. I mean, the short story I always say, well, it was my great-grandfather who taught me, but it was not really. And, again, back to this notion of former lives, people talk about ancestral memory, that we were all born with some kind of memories from before. So I have no idea why I still do it. It relaxes me. I tend to be, hectic-y kind of person. But for some reason, this just puts me in a place where I can do all this tedious work. And, it's really relaxing and produce things, and I sell things, and it's really cool.
That's really neat. The grounding part is so important. There's so many challenges in life, and I think as long as each of us find what does that. Sometimes it's gardening, sometimes it's music, reading, walking.
I remember, I think it was Rosie Greer from the New York Giants used to knit.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so does the Swedish Army. The Swedish, it's always a funny thing because the other thing is when you do these things, they're always considered feminine, and I think it was so interesting that my great grandfather was a weaver. He was a silk weaver, and in northern Italy, there's a silk production that's directly connected to Marco Polo's trips from China. The mulberry bushes that the silkworms eat off of grow there profusely everywhere, and so it worked really well in Italy. And so he was a silk weaver. And it's kind of like the chef thing. Chefs are male, cooks are female. So
but
weaving.
Those boxes.
Oh, I know,
work.
Stupid, really stupid.
Yeah.
And weaving. So weaving this way, hand weaving. It is pretty much still a lot of women who do it, but I find it really cool that I'm not a woman and I do it.
I think it's fabulous. And in Morocco, David and I were in Morocco, and the people that do the knitting, gorgeous hats and really beautiful work on the men.
Yes, sure.
I'm just curious about this. So can you make something as wide as from end to end?
Exactly, it's 62 inches long, and I could actually do the whole thing. Which I have not done on this loom, but I've done it on other looms, and absolutely. I have a sort of standard rug I make, which is 36 inches by 45 inches, so that's what I'm doing here, but I could absolutely do the whole length.
Yep. Right, so now we're over here at the second loom, just moved over from there, and we can get an idea of what you're doing.
Sure.
Good, we're going to move out of the way so the viewers can see.
So this loom is actually on loan to me from the Brantford Historical Society, and the pieces of the loom that are the dark one is a loom that was here in Brantford probably about 80 years ago. They were looms called union looms that were actually produced in upstate New York, and they were considered portable. So very heavy. So it's funny. And then what I did, I just added this, the lighter wood, I just added more pieces on it to preserve a little bit of the old loom, so it puts less stress on the older loom. And I hung this thing called a beater down from the top. And the way it works is so simple. So you wind on the warp threads on the back, then you bring them through what's called the harnesses, and each thread has its own pedal, which has a hole in it. And so on this loom, I basically thread, from the first, second, third, and fourth harness, I thread that way. And then when I press the pedals, I open up what's called the shed. So you open up a space in between the threads so that you can put the shuttle through, and that's how you basically weave. The front, this is called a beater, which is basically a big comb that packs down the weft, you call it, the weft that goes across. And then as you move forward, I can release the back end of the loom, and then the ratchet, and then it comes forward as I wind it on the front. So it's a really simple idea. It seems complicated, but it's really very easy. I mean, I always say it's like a big potholder machine. We're making big potholders.
Yeah, we used to do that as children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and so this is I'm weaving kind of traditional rag rugs, which are actually do have a really interesting history in Brantford because there were a lot of Swedes who came to Brantford. And rag rugs, although they were done by a lot of people, the Swedes still today are very focused on making rag rugs. And what it is you take old cloth, so old clothes, anything sort of old, and you make strips of it, and then this becomes the thread, the weft, and then you weave into the stronger cotton. I have cotton warp here, and these will be small rugs. And what's fun is, creatively I can basically take whatever colors I want, and I do a really brief sewing stitch to connect them like this. It's just a quick sewing stitch, and then I just make ribbons and ribbons and ribbons and ribbons, and then I put them all together. I roll them up in a ball, and then I put them on the shuttle. I attach them to the shuttle like this, and then you wind it on the shuttle, and then you just weave. So.
And is it always cotton?
No, it could be anything. No, I mean I could do straw if I wanted. I could do anything. You see rattan rugs, which is kind of like fiber, and but this is just closed, and then you just weave. So the petals will separate the threads, and then you pass the shuttle through, and then you sort of make sure it's kind of all the way through, and then you just beat it down, packs it into place, and then you change the direction of the threads. So every other thread goes down. Now I threw the shuttle through, and then I bang the beater forward, and then I change the threads, and I just throw it through. And you basically keep doing this until you're driven crazy. No, it's actually, for me, I always think it's really funny because they used to make people in mental institutions weave, because it has such a grounding, and the noise of the loom and the regularity of it. In Connecticut Valley Hospital, CVH, up in Middletown, where I grew up, they had a whole huge weaving room with about 100 looms in it that a lot of the people who were having mental problems would be using.
And I'm curious, Rob, is it all sort of a surprise how it turns out?
Oh, completely.
Completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, so I'm a really bad designer. Like, I'm so bad with any kind of design. I'm really a mechanical weaver, and I have a lot of friends who are way better with visuals. And sometimes when I'm making something that's, I'm like an article for women's clothing is my bane of my existence, because I don't really know what might appeal to a woman. So I end up asking a lot of my friends, I'm making scarves, what do you like? What do you don't like? What colors do you like? So that's really helpful. So when I make the rag rugs, I kind of just wing it. And I have behind you, it's off camera, but there's just a ton of fabric that comes from sheets and curtains and old shirts. And, I just kind of, when I build a rug like this, I just kind of go and grab colors I think would go together. I cut the fabric into strips, and then I sew them together. So here's some examples. This one is a little bit used because it's been on my floor for a couple of years, but this is an example of what I do. Again, just sort of willy-nilly putting in the colors. That. Yeah, and then this is two colors, and it's it's so sturdy. So this is about 3 years old.
And it's reversible also.
It's reversible, yes. Yeah. Yep, it's reversible, and
you throw it in the wash.
You can throw it in the wash.
Wow,
and
that's good.
Yeah, and they won't really shrink. And
that's excellent.
Yeah, and then this one is a newer one that I just finished. I don't know why I'm doing red, white, and blue, but actually this is red, white, and pink. But anyway, so this is sort of a typical rag rug, and they can be any length. Upstairs in the house, I have one that's 15 feet long. Wow. That's along the hallway of the upper hallway upstairs. But this is basically what you find, and there are a lot of people who are way more creative than I am that build some really beautiful color combinations and things with just rags, with old cloth.
Yes, that's the beauty to recycle.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. It's recycling, and it also harkens back to the old days when you had one pair of underwear, one dress, one pair of pants, and when those got old and holey, you'd get a new one. But then that cloth you would take and you would reuse, and you would make rugs.
Yep. I love it.
I wonder if that was one of the reasons why during the World War II time, or just post-war, in Brooklyn, New York, where I lived, we had a man who came by yelling outside in the courtyard of the apartment buildings, between apartment buildings, I cash clothes. He bought used clothing
Yep.
that I think they
Maybe-
used to
maybe
manufacture other products.
Maybe they were doing, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can really do a lot with old stuff. I mean, the other thing that they used to make, and which I do too, and I'm not really good at it, but I do it for the Christmas shop that I have, is quilts. You know, so yeah, so you just I cut up squares, I sew them into long strips, I sew the strips together, I put it back on, put some cotton inside, and boom.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And Robert, here's another adorable little
Yeah,
loom.
it's- yeah.
It's like the three little looms.
Yeah,
Three little
I
looms,
know.
yeah, exactly.
But Robert, these colors are luscious.
I know. So this is because I asked my friends, like feminine girlfriends, to
Right.
tell me. So this loom is the one that I always had in New York because it was small enough for my apartment and whatnot, and it's built on the same principle. The threads go up and down, the beater in the front, and then I just make scarves on this. They're really lightweight, very pretty colors, and
Oh,
yeah, and it's a really cute loom. I use it here. I'll be using it shortly. It's not threaded up yet, but it's going to be, and I'll be using it to make scarves.
So it's
for
an
the winter.
apartment size.
It's an apartment size, yeah.
I love the suggestion of your friend with the hot pink. And
Yeah,
it's soft.
yes.
It's luscious.
It's luscious, yeah.
I love it.
And I make shawls and also scarves for women. I used to do this in the city and sell my scarves on 86 and
Oh, really?
Columbus, across the street from the Natural History Museum. On every Sunday, there's a flea market.
Oh,
So I used to do that. Yeah, it was fun. I'd bring my spinning wheel and I'd spin, and people were like, "What are you doing?"
Oh,
"I'm
that
spinning."
was a
And-
good attraction.
Yeah, exactly. A
So,
big,
do you want to show
big
our
dude
viewers?
spinning.
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
The viewers, your spinning.
So here we are, going for a spin.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a spinning wheel, obviously. I, again, along the relaxation thing, this wheel is really cool. It's from Boston, and it's probably about 250, 300 years old. And it still clicks along, makes this noise. And what I'm spinning alpaca.
Wow.
Actually
that is
from-
so warm and
yeah, from-
wonderful.
From Connecticut, from up in Deep River, a guy who was raising alpaca, and yeah, it's a very relaxing sort of art. And the other thing that's on the loom or on the spinning wheel is this flax. And what's cool about Brantford and flax was that Brantford was actually a huge center of flax production. And flax is this hair. It comes from a plant, and when spun and woven, it's linen. So linen is flax. Yeah.
Wow.
And Brantford, in Brantford we have Flax Mill Road. Do you know that road? No, it's a road not far from here. And so Brantford and Guildford were actually really well known for flax production. Brushy Plain and all that area up there was all fields of flax. And actually Alexander Hamilton, when he came through Brantford, made mention of the fact that there were a lot of flax fields around here. They're beautiful plants because they grow and then they have a purple flower on top, so the fields can look quite beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and Brantford was really known for this. So this kind of production, before the Industrial Revolution and before big spinning machines, this is how they spun flax. And spinning was pretty much a woman, young girl's job, except in the winter. So in the winter, because there was such a need for a lot of thread, the winter actually the men would spin too, because they really didn't do much outside.
Oh.
Wow, just fantastic.
Yeah, thanks.
So, viewers, I know you're going to share with us how exciting this has been.
Yeah.
I mean, your passion just, it's palpable.
Thank you.
So, we thank you so
Oh no,
much
it's
for
really
your
been
time.
fun. No, it's really been fun.
It has been
Yeah.
for us too.
Yeah,
And-
thank you so much.
And viewers, we thank you so much for joining and meeting one of our most special neighbors here in Brantford, Robert Aiudi. And please join us next month for another episode of Meet Your Neighbors.